I'm Sarah, a 28-year-old company employee. I've been working in sales since joining the company, but recently I transferred to the HR department. Now I work under a seasoned male boss handling recruitment. I've come to realize that recruiting people is truly challenging. No matter how many tests or interviews we conduct, it's difficult to see through a person's nature, and we can't really know if someone is truly a good fit until we actually work with them. However, my boss, having a long career, is adept at discerning people. In fact, he hasn't reportedly made any hiring mistakes in recent years, and the individuals he selects seem to thrive and contribute significantly to the company's success. But, about a year after I joined the HR department, something shocking happened that even seasoned HR professionals like my boss had never encountered before. One job applicant who came for an interview made incredibly offensive remarks. Interestingly, this applicant was likely a student from T University, which is renowned as one of the most prestigious and well-known universities in the United States. I worked for a small-scale company where about half of the employees were high school graduates and the other half were college graduates. Therefore, I never expected someone from T University to apply, and I eagerly awaited the interview day to see what kind of student they would be. However, while I was excited, I also felt a bit intimidated by their prestigious academic background, and honestly, I was anxious. The news of a job applicant from T University stirred up a buzz within the company. Yet, my boss remained calm and composed as always. He didn't show any particular excitement or anxiety, and he was calmly preparing for the interview. Watching my boss behave like that, I truly respected him even more. On the day of the interview, George from T University arrived at the company, and as I had imagined, he looked like a capable young man. He had a good posture, had a nice smile and dressed smartly in a suit. As the interview began, he answered every question clearly without hesitation. He occasionally showed thoughtful gestures, but he never became nervous or spoke in a quiet voice, and remained confident throughout the interview. As a recruitment officer, I was most curious about why someone with a prestigious education like George chose to apply for a position at a relatively unknown small to medium-sized enterprise rather than a large corporation. He explained passionately that he saw potential in our company and wanted to contribute to its growth and development. I felt delighted that our company was chosen by a student from T University. Before the interview even finished, I was convinced that he would be hired. Not only was his educational background impressive, but his responses were also perfect. He's undoubtedly smart, and he would certainly be a good influence on the company. However, what happened next shocked me. After the interview ended and George left, my boss surprisingly said,
"We're not hiring him."
"What? Not hiring him?" I exclaimed in disbelief, as I naturally assumed he would be hired. He graduated from T University. He's an excellent applicant, so why not hire him? This is an opportunity not to be missed. Considering there are many other companies in our industry, a student from T University should have opportunities to aim for larger-scale companies with higher salaries. However, he chose our company and expressed that it was his first choice. Moreover, there were no issues during the interview, so why did my boss easily decide not to hire him? However, the boss then asked me,
"Didn't you realize his true color?"
"Huh? His true color?" I was completely puzzled and taken aback.
"I've been in recruitment for many years, but I've never encountered such an outrageous job applicant before."
He gave me a wry smile. Then he showed me something. It was George's resume. However, I still had a puzzled expression on my face. His resume was meticulously written in neat handwriting, detailing his educational background up to entering T University. It included qualifications, skills, and a motivation for applying for this job, all filled out impeccably. Therefore, I couldn't understand at all what the issue with his resume could possibly be. However, he said,
It's not about what's written. It's the photo.
Then I finally realized. George, who came for the interview and who in the resume's photo clearly had different hairstyles. In the photo, his hair was neatly cut short, but when we interviewed him, it was slightly longer, reaching down to his ears. Still, I couldn't quite understand my boss's decision. Certainly, I had noticed his slightly longer hair when I first saw him, but I didn't think it was something so unsightly as to reject him. However, when I later heard the reason for his rejection from my boss, I was on the verge of screaming in disbelief. And I came to realize that I still lacked the ability to judge people. The truth is, he had a shocking secret. Throughout the interview, I thought I was observing him closely. Yet, I completely failed to notice anything, and as someone responsible for hiring, I feel ashamed. Feeling disappointed, I notified him of the rejection via email. However, I quickly switched gears and prepared for the next candidate's interview. Fortunately, there were many other job seekers who expressed interest in joining our company. So I decided to forget about George and refocus on hiring a good candidate next time. Little did I or my boss anticipate the unbelievable chaos that awaited us afterward. A few days after George's interview, when I just left the company for an errand, a young man suddenly called out to me near the entrance. I turned around in surprise, only to find that it was George himself. I felt I had to say something, but I was at a loss for words and started to feel flustered. It was because I was feeling awkward as I had just informed him that we rejected him, and I never expected to see him again. The fact that he appeared before me unexpectedly, without any prior notice, coming all the way to the company, gave me an unsettling feeling. What should I do? Just greet him briefly and leave? As I was thinking like that, he spoke up.
I need to talk to you, the recruitment managers.
Judging from his expression, it was obvious he was angry. Surely, he had something to say about his recent interview. As expected, he said,
I'm not satisfied with being rejected in the interview.
Furthermore, George confronted me.
I can't believe you would reject someone like me with a high academic background and outstanding qualifications. I want to know the reason for my rejection.
I'm sorry, but we cannot disclose our selection criteria. I responded politely, but George suddenly became furious.
You're from such a small company, don't get cocky.
George shouted.
And you hiring managers are probably just high school graduates or from small-time universities, right? You dare to reject someone like me, with high academic qualifications? What a joke.
He continued to hurl insults, his face turning red with anger. I was initially stunned and stood there in shock, but gradually, a feeling of anger started to rise within me. There's nothing wrong with asking for the reason for a rejection. However, in his case, his behavior clearly warranted the rejection. Despite this, he insulted the company, calling it small-time, and belittled the people working there, which was absolutely unacceptable. I resolved to teach this arrogant man, whose only asset was his academic background, a lesson. Well then, prepare yourself. I won't hold back anymore. George's gentlemanly demeanor from the interview had completely gone, and now he continued to verbally abuse me. I felt like shouting back at him immediately. Please wait a moment. I will fetch someone senior to speak with you." In a calm voice, I told him that, then took out my phone from my bag and called my boss, who was in a meeting inside the company. Despite being in the middle of a meeting, my boss immediately came out when I explained that George had come to ask about the reason for his rejection. Upon seeing my boss, George quickly confronted him.
"Hey, tell me why you rejected me. I graduated from T University. My interview was perfect."
He was about to grab him at any moment. I felt a mix of anger and nervousness at George, who was being disrespectful to someone who was much older than him. However, my boss remained calm as ever. He looked at George and calmly said,
Did you think you could deceive me?
Ha!
George widened his eyes. My boss continued calmly.
Your interview was indeed nearly perfect. But that wasn't truly your ability, was it?
Well, that's...
Suddenly, George fell silent. It turns out that his flawless responses during the interview were not his own. He had received instructions from an external source on how to answer. The reason behind this is as follows. The first thing that caught the attention of my boss was George's unusually long hair. It was completely different from his photo on the resume, which raised suspicions that there must be a reason for this discrepancy. Consequently, my boss began to observe him closely. Then, when George casually touched his hair, my boss noticed something. Surprisingly, he was wearing small wireless earphones during the interview. Although it's common to see young people wearing earphones all day in public, it's unthinkable to listen to music during a job interview. Additionally, my boss had noticed another suspicious detail about him. He took too long to respond to our questions. My boss found it unnatural why he pondered each question so deeply. To me, it looked like he was earnestly searching for words. Upon noticing the earphone, my boss watched him more carefully and found that he had a smartphone in his suit pocket. Normally, during an interview, a smartphone should be kept in a bag, not in a pocket. This confirmed my boss's suspicions. George had been using his smartphone to record the interview in real time and receiving instructions from someone outside on how to respond. I couldn't have imagined that someone who seemed so capable would resort to such tactics. However, my boss had already seen through his deception early on. Certainly, looking back, his behavior during the interview was a bit unnatural. But he must have been confident he wouldn't get caught. He tried to pass the interview, which is the serious process of assessing suitable candidates for the company by using an underhanded way. Realizing that my boss had seen through everything, George turned pale and trembled. My boss confronted him sternly.
Why did someone as talented as you, a graduate of T University, decide to cheat?
Is there any proof that I cheated?
He shouted, trembling. It seemed he still wasn't going to admit his wrongdoing, but he had no grounds left to act superior. I showed him the screen of my phone and said, I don't need any evidence when you're practically admitting it yourself.
What?
He froze again. What I showed him was a post from his social media account. After the interview, my boss told me about George's suspicious behavior, so I was secretly checking social media. When I searched with his name and university details, I quickly found an account that unmistakably belonged to him. On the day he had his interview, George posted on social media saying, Today, I went for an interview at a safety company. After that, as I read through his posts, I was left speechless by the audacity of the content. While calling our company a safety was disrespectful enough, he boldly admitted, detailing how he did it, on that site, saying I was wearing earphones so it was easy. From what I gathered by reading his past posts, it seems that while he excelled in academics, he struggled significantly with speaking in front of people. However, interviews are unavoidable when it comes to getting a job. Then, instead of making an effort to overcome his weakness himself, he came up with the idea of paying a friend who was good at interviews to give him real-time instructions. His friend likely took it casually, like a part-time job. He tried to pass the interview by some sort of impersonation. Moreover, he specifically mentioned our company's name and slandered, saying things like, "It's a mediocre company, but I applied as a safety, and the interviewer looked dumb," and so on. In his past posts, there were numerous offensive remarks that called into question his character, revealing that he has a rather despicable nature. He likely posted about his cheating as if it were a heroic tale. Perhaps he underestimated the risk, believing he wouldn't get caught if he didn't use his real name. Faced with the evidence, George stood in stunned silence for a moment.
I don't care if you found some random posts online.
But he tried to act tough.
Your company is just for insurance anyway. I'm a student from T University. I'll definitely get an offer from a major company.
He continued to glare at my boss and me arrogantly. Unfortunately, you might not get an offer from anywhere. However, I responded with a dismissive laugh.
What? What did you say?
George's face contorted in dismay. I've already informed the university about this incident. Well, someone like you, who can't even get through an interview without cheating, probably won't get hired anywhere.
What?
George muttered in despair. If the university found out everything, even if he had an offer, it would likely be revoked. I feel sorry for him, as confident as he was, but we didn't want to let him cause any more damage in the industry. After I revealed the decisive facts to him, he finally seemed to give up. George slumped his shoulders and walked away dejectedly. Afterwards, I heard George was reportedly rejected by the major company he applied to as his first choice, as well as by several other companies. Our informing his university about his misconduct likely played a role, but I believe that other companies' HR departments also checked his posts on social media. No matter how impressive one's academic credentials are, if their character is severely lacking, no company would want to hire them. As a result, George, having become a job seeker again after these events, seems to have started looking for part-time jobs just to get by. Because he had relied on cheating all this time and had never properly attended interviews, he couldn't even pass job interviews for part-time work. Consequently, it seems he has become a highly educated jobless man, having a miserable life. Meanwhile, his friend who assisted him in cheating also faced consequences. Although this friend had already secured a job offer at a certain company, the impersonation was uncovered, leading to the offer being rescinded. I heard he was now reluctantly working part-time to make ends meet. Both of them brought this upon themselves, but they are still young and presumably talented. I hope they reflect deeply on their actions and bounce back from this experience. And as for me, I got manipulated by a really dishonest job applicant this time, but afterward, I was able to successfully hire a student who demonstrated both excellent skills and character. It's truly rewarding to see the employees I've hired thriving in their roles. While it might take some time for me to develop the ability to assess people like my boss does, I'm determined to continue giving my best in this fulfilling job.